right, and we are live. Welcome everyone to episode 33 of the Endless Report here. My name is Tony, your host. Welcome back if you joined us before, and welcome to the show if you're brand new here. We may have some new faces today on the stream, and we have quite the docket today of news. I'm going to pull that up in a second so you guys can all see. Quite a doozy here. Lots of news to get through. We weren't here last week, unfortunately, so we have a lot to catch up on a bit. So we're going to try to get through the list here pretty quickly today. But if you stick with me, we'll try to get to the end of that list. I think within an hour or so today. We'll try to make that happen. We'll see how quickly we can get through it. But that being said, as you can see on screen, we're about to hop right into it with Halo Infinite. This is a game we've talked about quite a bit throughout the summer, on the show. And we actually got some really good news this week, some exciting stuff for Halo. And as you've seen from the title, I think maybe Halo could be bouncing back here. So we're going to get into that right off the bat at the start of the show. But before we do, I just want to once again welcome everyone new here to the show, and thank you for tuning in here on the channel. So as I said, Halo Infinite gets its winter update here. We see Forge, co-op mode, achievements, and more. It's been a while for Halo. Obviously, we've talked a lot about it on the channel. I won't reiterate too much, but for those who haven't been here, it's been a bit of a rocky launch for Halo Infinite. We've been going on 2 years now, I believe, since launch, and we're just getting to the point right now where I think this game is really coming into its own and into a complete package, if you will. So we talked a bit last week, a few weeks back, about how they were not planning on bringing campaign co-op mode. That mode was canceled. Then about a week or so later, players found that it actually was able to be enabled within the game's netcode. They were able to do a workaround and make it work through the main menu. And then a few weeks later, 343 did confirm they were enabling it, and it actually is coming now in the winter update. So a bit of a rocky road there with the campaign co-op. They said it's coming, then they canceled the mode. Now they brought it back, and it's officially part of the game with no workarounds or anything like that. So that's definitely a positive for sure for Halo Infinite. Campaign co-op is kind of one of those staples of the Halo franchise. People were, clamoring for it for a while. So it makes sense why they finally were able to answer that call. That being said, Forge mode, of course, another big staple of the Halo franchise, finally added. It's out of beta mode now. It is finally officially part of the game. You can make your own custom maps now, share those custom maps. That's personally probably my favorite part of Halo. I remember back playing Halo 3 and Reach really were the days where I was really big into those custom maps back in, I want to say, 2007 to 2010, around then. And we would share custom maps with our friends, create Forge mode maps. Really was the core of, I think, the Halo experience was that custom games mode for me. And Halo Infinite didn't have that for a very long time. It's been about 2 years now, like I said, that they've really just been on that competitive gaming kind of focus. They only had a few maps. You had to pay for battle passes, even though it was a free-to-play multiplayer. And that's the last big thing here, is that on top of these achievements, on top of these new Forge and co-op modes, you also get the new battle pass, which is free for everyone. And I'm going to scroll through here a bit just to give some examples here. But I'm not sure if they have, here we go, some pictures of the battle pass on this article. We finally get actual armor sets. As you can see, it's the Mark V armor from Halo Reach. But previously in Halo Infinite, unless you spent money or unless you had, one of those season battle passes that you were able to opt into, you only had default armor and you were able to change your colors just a bit. So most soldiers, most Spartans on the battlefield in the game were looking very similar. That being said, of course, now we have this new free battle pass, so everyone can level up, alongside each other and hopefully get some new armor and cosmetics. And it's not looking like everyone's the exact same player on the battlefield. Personally, I think there should have been at least one free battle pass at the start, given that this game is entirely based on battle passes, so there was no unlockable content outside of them. And personally, I'm not the biggest fan of that. Again, I'm not saying battle passes are everywhere nowadays. I'm not saying that isn't something that's, I have to get used to. Of course, if you're in your shooter space at all, battle passes are kind of unavoidable at this point. That being said, I do think that if I pay, for a game, and I'll give the benefit of the doubt here, it is a free-to-play multiplayer, but people did pay $60 for the campaign. A lot of people did. And I think if you're paying for a game, again, they have those special editions with the campaign where you get some stuff, but I think you should get the battle pass regardless of of the entry level point. I think whether it was $5, $10, even a level an entry point there, I think it should have been something that everybody got instead of an optional thing, because then no one, when it's a free play game and it's optional to pay, most people aren't, and those who are just basically paying to get those upgrades. And again, I understand I'm basically just explaining battle passes here, but I do think that an essential part of any game is having that reward system, having some incentive to keep playing without throwing in extra money. And I think there should be some base level of progression on every game, regardless if there's a battle pass system, regardless if it's a live service. Again, I'm not anti-live service or anything. I think games can have great, awesome bonus content in the years after launch. I think it's actually an awesome system if done properly. And I think, we should, make sure we have a solid base game before you jump into that live service approach. It's kind of my main complaint with Halo Infinite from the start that this game kind of launched a little bit too early, where we're just getting here 2 years later to where it feels like it's kind of the base level of how the game should be before we start expanding on the live service approach. So I'm not I'm not the biggest fan of having to get through like the alpha and beta stages of a game under the name of live service. It's kind of how I feel about it, where we release games that are a little too early to be on the market, and you're kind of just waiting for all the feature sets to fully flesh out. So that's again, I could talk about Halo Infinite, for 20 minutes here. So I digress there. I'm not going to move on here to our next topic, but I do think that, like I said, this is a positive. As you can see, all these new armor sets, this is all part of that new battle pass. They are free, so that's answering that complaint I have there. As I said, we have 2 new multiplayer maps as well, a bunch of new achievements here. I'm not going to go through all of them because there are a lot of new achievements. I did check these through before, but overall, this was a great update for Halo. I'm happy with it. I think it's time to be optimistic with it, and I think going forward, we're going to see a lot more good content from Halo Infinite, hopefully. So that being said, I'm going to move us over here for a moment as I go down our docket. Again, a lot of items in the docket here. It's really tiny on my screen, so I'm going to bear with me as I'm going to move that marker down as we get to our next story here. But we have something else pretty interesting. Another shooter story. Again, this is all kind of earlier last week. We're getting through a lot of news in the last 2 weeks here. So this comes from Battlefield 2042 over at EA. And I'm going to bring up the Battlefield website here as we get a new update on Season 3. So another new update, new weaponry, very similar to Halo, some new content for Battlefield over here on the side of things. So we get a lot of good things here, a lot of fixes. Again, this is another game we're still, fixing some things from launch. We got 2 map reworks here. So again, I think we're just hitting the 1-year mark on Battlefield 2042, so a little earlier in the lifespan. I'll be a little more forgiving here. But that being said, this was another game, of course, goes out saying had a bit of a rocky launch, still really in the recovery mode. Even EA had spoken about how they were trying to kind of revamp the Battlefield franchise after this launch. They have founded Ridgeline Games, who was working on that single-player narrative experience, I believe, in the Battlefield 2042 timeline of this universe. So we'll see what happens there. But the next Battlefield game as well, I believe, is kind of in early development. And the big question for a lot of people here has been Battlefield 2042. Is it still in active development? Are we kind of pushing out a few, quality of life updates so we can move on to the next game? That's been the kind of the question on the on the communities. Like, what's the word there? Just the big question for the community here. And I think that, again, with Season 3 here, I'm not sure this answers it exactly. I think what we get here is, I'll get into the details here. We get 3 new weapons. We got a new tank. We get a new map. Again, we get some more map fixes for 2 legacy maps. That being said, I do believe this is not, again, I wouldn't say a full-fledged season like you're going to see from Halo or maybe Call of Duty. Especially Call of Duty is kind of hard to compare it to because they have a lot of people working on that game. There's a lot going into that game, especially right now. Huge push for new content. That being said, we do get a new specialist as well. I can't complain here. Again, I've talked about Battlefield 2042 a bit on the show before, so I don't want to reiterate a lot of my previous thoughts on it. But I do think, again, this game, I think, runs great. It's beautiful. There's so much amazing texture work and the graphics, the gameplay, especially now after launch that it's been polished and fixed a lot of the bugs. It's really, really, just in terms of just a player controller, it runs really, really smooth. And I do enjoy running around it. That being said, it's really hard for me to almost admit that sometimes because as a Battlefield game, there are a lot of still core features just missing. As people have noted, and why they're reworking almost every single map, as you've seen every season, they rework a lot of the original maps, is that at launch, these maps were very wide and open. They were made for 128 players. That being said, they were very wide and open, and people said a little bit barren. There wasn't a lot of cover. There were these wide open gaps in the middle of the maps, and people weren't really, understanding exactly why that happened. There was a lot of rumors and speculation that this game was actually a planned battle royale release at some point. Then that got pivoted during development. Again, there's no confirmation there, but that still was a strong rumor for a very long time. And I could see that, with some of the map designs. That being said, they've been working a long time here trying to get it back to a core Battlefield experience. They said Season 4, not Season 3 yet, they're going to add specialists. Rather not specialists. We see the specialists here, but rather the class system on top of the specialists. So your assault class, your scout, your engineer, your and all that. So I think that getting back to the Battlefield classics and having all your 4 classes there is something that should be essential, should happen. That being said, that's not coming till Season 4, and we haven't got any more information on that when Season 4 is dropping. I believe it's early 2023. That being said, we're getting Season 3 here later this month, and about a week or so here. So again, I think something that's they've said a lot was like getting those specialists back. They've been saying that for about 6 months or so now. Again, I don't want to it's been only a year here, but it feels like a bit longer, to be honest, since the launch of Battlefield 2042. So I don't want to extrapolate any of the timelines here, but I do think they can get that in ASAP. That's really critical to getting this back to a core Battlefield experience. And I wish it wouldn't have taken, it doesn't take over a year or two to get just those class systems designated around the specialists. I think that really would, excuse me, that really would help this game kind of get back to a core Battlefield identity. That being said, we do get a little bit more from Battlefield Portal here. I believe they're adding more of those legacy weapons to Battlefield 2042 in the main modes. But again, it's a lot of just reworking and bug fixing of the original game with one new map and a new specialist and 3 new weapons here. We have this new railgun that was actually leaked earlier last week. We see that in the picture here, as well as what looks like a new shotgun, as well as this kind of like launcher. This looks more like this was also looking like a kind of a railgun beam gun we saw in the trailer. But that being said, still, some positive stuff here, looking good here. We get that, again, that kind of beam railgun I was speaking of there in this little clip. Again, that's about all for Battlefield 2042. I'm hoping that Season 3 could, bring some more players here into the fold. We also heard this game is going to be coming to Game Pass, which is really big. So hopefully that can get a boost, on the Xbox side of things, and a lot of more players will jump in and give this game a little more life, because it definitely needs some. There's not, the highest player counts. In fact, I think Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 1 have had higher player counts than the previous 2 Battlefield games over the past few months. So, as I said, again, I don't want to sugarcoat anything, but I do think that Battlefield 2042 does need a bit of a resurgence. I have a lot of faith in it, though. Again, I think the core gameplay and the core design of it is really, really well done. It seems like a lot of talented people have worked in this game. It just seems like there may have been a little more time that was needed to really get this thing polished and perfect the way it was meant to be. So I'm hoping that they can get to that state. And like I said, kind of close up this whole conversation with Halo and Battlefield. Yeah, I think that's the trouble with live service games. When you launch in not such a ready state, I mean, we've seen that with not even live service games, with games like Cyberpunk, with No Man's Sky, with things that you're updating as you go, whether it's single player, whether it's multiplayer, what have you. It's tough once you get it out the gate and it's already behind the ball, because then you're also, not only are you trying to get it back up to a certain level of par, you're also having to maintain the active player count and the active player base, especially in a multiplayer game like Battlefield. So you're doing both two things at once now. Now you're maintaining the active game and you're building it to where it should have been, maybe in the first place. So I think obviously this is one of those things where, of course, a delay is always going to be better than a game that's a bit rushed out. And we'll have more to talk about that later in the show. Actually, we have some more comments. You may see down there in the docket from Rockstar. They discussed a little bit about their past delays and some of their flops, as they said. A quote there from Rockstar. We'll get to that later in the show. That being said, I do want to move on, because we have a lot, as you can see there, we have a lot more stories to get to throughout the show here. So I'm going to move over my screen just for a moment, and we're going to get to what's next. And I'm just checking here. I actually will show this really briefly. This is just a little snippet of what was included in the Battlefield Season 3. Again, I already spoke on that. We get those 2 new weapons. We have a new throwing knife, actually, which I did not mention. Again, some more weapons. Those are vault weapons from Battlefield Portal, by the way, the ones I mentioned earlier. We get some new operator cosmetics as well, and then some new playlists. But again, just some new quality of life improvements. You see they have the special system rework with some stars there, because it's not there yet, but it's coming next season. So I'm not sure why they included it like that in this picture here. But again, Manifest and Breakaway are the 2 maps that are being reworked. Again, that being said, we're going to move on from Battlefield. As I said before, give me one moment here as I move that up on our docket. But we have another story here from actually Nintendo. So going around to Nintendo here, we did just cover some Xbox and a little third-party stuff here. Speaking of that, we have Nintendo Indie World. So bear with me as I just move our marker down, as I said, to Nintendo Indie World, and we'll get into that. So unfortunately, again, I have a lot of stories to cover today, so I'm not going to be able to go through every single game that was shown in Nintendo Indie World, though I do want to mention there were a lot of really cool indie games. I'm going to go back to the first one here, because it was one that a lot of people were talking about online, and I do want to mention really briefly. But we see Rogue Legacy 2 here. Was one I wanted to mention as well. A little to the left, I wanted to mention this again. We saw this, I believe, during Gamescom this summer. We covered on the show, where it's kind of like a very cozy organizing game, and it seems like a very kind of cozy little, like, what's the word here? Very relaxing game. So very interesting there. We have a few more, and if you're interested in Nintendo Indie World, especially if you have a Nintendo Switch, look up Nintendo Indie World and see everything that was shown during the showcase. There's a bunch of trailers as well. That being said, we have some more here. A lot of like different side scrollers and different isometric view games. Very interesting stuff here. We have Coffee Talk episode 2. I thought was worth mentioning. Coffee Talk had I want to say a cult following, had a pretty large following though. Game where you kind of play, you talk to patrons in the diner. So you're getting a sequel to that game that was pretty notable. Oni Road to the Mightiest Oni is another game that's what people were talking about. This comes out on March 9th, so very soon there. And again, I wish I could cover through all these. There's a good amount more, but I did want to cover one last one of the biggest games shown, which was Sports Story. This was a game that was shown a long time ago, I believe. I believe it was a few years back, 3-4 years since we've seen this title. That being said, it is back. It was one of the again, GameSpot says it was one of their most anticipated games of 2020. So I guess maybe 2-3 years ago was the first time we saw this game. That being said, it took a bit of a hiatus. I guess there was a bit of a delay there. Again, as you can see here, it looks like another side scroller. Very similar vibes. I hate to say because I feel like I compare every game to this now, but Stardew Valley, kind of similar side scroller vibes there, where you could join this town. You're a new member of the town, but there's actually all these sports. It's called again Sports Story in the name, and you can participate in a bunch of different sports, as you see here, like golf. There's BMX biking, volleyball, cricket, and more. But it's also an RPG. There's quests, there's dungeons, and you can encounter a lot of crazy storylines, and it's about you. I guess learning how to be the ultimate sports champion in this town. So it seems like a really fun, cool game. Again, probably perfect game to play on Nintendo Switch. So definitely seems exciting, but definitely something to check out there. And I believe the presentation said it's coming out in December, though I'm not sure if we got any release date yet. So we'll have to stay tuned on that because that's very, very imminent. That being said, I do want to move on here because we have a lot more to cover. But definitely check out Nintendo Indie World if you want to see more on some of those Nintendo Switch games coming into the fold. So I'm going to switch over our docket here, and we'll get on to our next story, which is actually a teaser for the new Mass Effect. So we got a few announcements here from BioWare, and this was the first one earlier last week. So this was actually back on N7 day, of course, for Mass Effect. If you're not a Mass Effect fan, N7. I'm not a big Mass Effect fan, so I should note that. I've been waiting to play the whole trilogy. I have the remaster collection saved. It's downloaded. I'm ready to play it. But I do know N7 is a company within, the Mass Effect universe, maybe even insignia of a specific company. Again, I don't know much about Mass Effect, and I'm showing that now as I say that. But N7 Day is specifically, a kind of a holiday, kind of like May the 4th for Star Wars, because it's November 7th and aligns with N7. Excuse me, the in-universe brand. If you give me one more, I'm just gonna take a sip of water. It's got a bit of a cough here, and then we'll get into this Mass Effect 5 tease. Thank you. But anyway, so as I said here, it was the N7 day. We didn't get much here, except we got this one screenshot along with kind of a link to some. It was kind of a corrupted file almost. There was not much said here. It was a very broad just announcement where we got this screenshot, and you see here there's some information in the corner as well. That being said, as someone who's not a Mass Effect fan, I just thought this was a really cool tease. I went online in the next few hours, maybe the next day or so, and the Mass Effect fan base was going crazy all over this. There was massive amounts of rumors, speculations, discussions based around this because there's a lot actually hidden that you may not realize, on the surface here within these pictures. There's actually also a little teaser message that one of the developers leaked as well that led to an audio message that was not apparently was garbled. It was unable to be heard until you deciphered it. You got the encrypted audio message, and then you heard some dialogue from characters within the Mass Effect universe speaking on what could be going on here. Again, since I'm not a giant Mass Effect fan, I don't want to speak on this too much in any mistaken way. I don't want to mistake any of the story beats here or spoil anything for anyone else who's trying to get into it. I will say, though, we see here this is a mass relay, which is a big part of the Mass Effect story. These relays where you could bounce throughout space, even to different galaxies, a big part of the Mass Effect storyline. I know that. And this is a new mass relay being built by some other maybe a previously unknown company, as we see here for the Mass Effect universe. So some new story beats here, and that also that audio message detailed some ideas about humans. They said there were some humans revolting. So again, it could be some alien versus human storyline. Again, I don't want to get too deep into it or ruin any of the new Mass Effect game for anybody. But if you are interested in Mass Effect, especially post Andromeda, I know maybe didn't get the same critical reception as the original trilogy. That being said, it seems like they're incorporating some of what worked for Andromeda, in those story beats with the original trilogy and kind of bringing it all together to really bring Mass Effect into a new era here. It seems I've heard a lot of positive, feedback from those who are Mass Effect fans, so it seems like they're going in the right direction. I'm pretty interested in it. I think I'm gonna have to get on, the first 3 games and really catch up with Mass Effect before this new expansion to the series comes out, because it's one of the biggest blind spots, I would say, in my gaming catalog. It's one of those. I'm a big RPG fan, I'm a big narrative games fan, so I think I definitely have to start playing the Mass Effect series, excuse me, for sure. That being said, speaking of BioWare, we have another announcement from them actually coming from Dragon Age. So I'm going to move us down here to our next article, and we'll talk about Dragon Age Dreadwolf. This was something that kind of flew under the radar for me a bit. Again, I've only played briefly. I played Dragon Age Inquisition briefly. I've only played a small amount of Dragon Age Origins. So again, I can't say I'm the biggest Dragon Age fan either. Again, these are some series I really have to play, especially being a fan of Knights of the Old Republic. A huge Knights of the Old Republic fan. You know, some old school BioWare game there. So definitely with Mass Effect, with Dragon Age, I really need to get back on my BioWare kick there and enjoy some of those games, because definitely huge fan bases, great RPG storytelling here. Another kind of blind spot at games I really would love to play. That being said, BioWare has mentioned this game's already in an alpha state, the next Dragon Age, so a little sooner than I would have thought. There hasn't been a lot of discussion on the next Dragon Age, so I guess it kind of came out of left field, at least for me, from what I've heard on the next one. But it is playable from start to finish. It is in a full alpha state. So we're thinking we may get this Dragon Age game within the next year or so. We're going to have to wait and see, but it's way more imminent than we previously thought. So if you're a story fan, if you're an RPG fan, we have a lot coming up. We have a new Mass Effect maybe in the next 3-4 years. Again, I don't want to jump the gun there, because I feel like that could still be a bit of a ways off, especially with Dragon Age being much closer. That being said, we have Starfield from Bethesda. We have Avowed from Obsidian. A lot of big RPGs are on the horizon for sure. So definitely something to get excited about. But again, BioWare GM Gary McKay said that the game is in an alpha stage, which is a huge step for this game. He says, quote, up to this point, we've been working hard on various parts of the game, but it's not until the alpha milestone that a game comes together. Again, so I'm reading from the article here on my other monitor. Apologies if I'm not reading it from the mic there. I'm going to try to make sure I'm still on the mic. But as you can see here from this article, it does seem like that, again, of course, alpha stage is very important. That goes without saying, but it does seem like they're very happy with where they are so far based on these quotes. Again, this is, public, speak to them. Of course, if they weren't happy and they said, the game's not really going too well right now, they probably wouldn't, admit that. That being said, it sounds positive. It sounds good. It's good. They wouldn't really be announcing an alpha stage if they weren't, ready to announce so. So all in all, good announcement there. And again, another quote here, quote, now for the first time, we can experience the entire game from the opening scenes of the first mission to the very end. We can see, hear, feel, and play everything as a cohesive experience. And they're saying here that, the visual fidelity and a few of the gameplay's features will have to take its final form as time goes on here. But again, he says we could take the story we've written and see if we're expressing it well through the characters, dialogue, cinematics, and ultimately the player's journey. And now that we have ability to have a complete playthrough, we can iterate and polish on things that matter most to our fans. So very straightforward quote there. You could probably say that about a lot of games at Alpha State, but again, a very good thing to say. I think, nothing else I'd want to add there other than sounds good. I'm very excited to see what else we could see here from Dragon Age in the future. I'm not sure when we'll see the first snippets of gameplay from Dreadwolf, but again, as we're in this state here, it seems like we will be hearing more about this game more often. They're getting out of the kind of sitting in the dark, not wanting to say anything stage of development where everything's got to still be worked on. Now they're getting to the point where it seems like they're going to start being able to share more and more details about the story and the world of this game. So very cool stuff. Again, if you're a Dragon Age fan at all, it's probably really exciting. And of course, this article mentions as well, and 7-Day and Mass Effect, given that Dreadwolf and Mass Effect are both being developed at BioWare, and both were announced very closely to each other. That being said, to this article, we're going to take a quick break as we have a lot to get through today. I'll be back in about 30 seconds to a minute here. Very, very quick kind of commercial break, and I'll be right back with the rest of the show. So bear with me there, and I'll see you guys in a minute or so. I'll really briefly recap is that GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, got some projections here and Take-Two's latest earnings call. So Take-Two, the parent company of Rockstar Games, as well as 2K Games, if you know, from the NBA 2K series, as well as, Borderlands and everything that 2K produces. Rockstar and 2K are both under the Take-Two banner, who just had their earnings call here. And again, as you can see on screen, again, apologies for the no audio there before, but GTA 5 has raked in 170 million units, which is a really, really unprecedented number sold here. And Red Dead Redemption hit 70 million as a whole. So again, 70 million itself is a giant metric, I was just saying before. So for GTA 5 to be 100 million units sold over that, and it's really unprecedented how how big of a monolith that game really is. That being said, okay, you're hearing me now. Awesome. That being said, GTA 5 gets a lot of its revenue from its ongoing GTA Online revenue from its shark cards. So when you're buying that digital GTA currency, Take Two and Rockstar are making a lot of revenue through that. So on top of the 170 million units of just the game being sold, there's just so much more revenue on top of that from everyone who's bought the game and then bought those shark cards or those GTA money. So they make a lot of revenue from that GTA Online shark card stream. So that being said, I believe GTA 5 is still currently the largest grossing media product of all time. And that's video games, books, movies, anything you could think of, comics, and anything. There has not been a single media product that has made more money than Grand Theft Auto 5. So that's really quite a statistic there. Again, it's something I always bring up once we talk about these GTA metrics because they just continue to rise every quarter when we have these earnings calls. And it's still, there's really nothing even getting close to that GTA 5 mark. So it's something to mention. That being said, CEO Strauss Zelnick of Take-Two mentioned that although things are going great now with the GTA series, they did have to reduce their projected earnings for the next fiscal year. So this comes for a few different reasons. Again, like I said, the Take-Two and the Take-Two revenue stream from Grand Theft Auto is really large. That being said, they have a lot of other investments and revenue streams. We did speak on earlier in the year on the show that they acquired Zynga with a huge, I believe it was $12 billion acquisition of the mobile developer. I think, Zynga for, I believe, so big mobile games of Candy Crush, a few others there. Large revenue in that space as well. That being said, mobile games are not at the same, speed of revenue they used to be. And that's what we're seeing here from these Take-Two earnings calls. So I'm going to move back over to that article. Again, apologies that I had that audio cut out earlier, so we weren't hearing this, but I'm going to recap this real quick. That Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick says he'll take delays here over flops any day. And basically what he's talking about is that because of this reduced the reason for this reduced earnings forecast, is like I said there, the reduced projections for the mobile games, but also some minor delays in some of their AAA projects. Can this be Grand Theft Auto 6 that's getting delayed? Maybe this is some Take-Two, 2K games, maybe something from the Borderlands series, the Wonderlands new series. I'm not sure what could be going on there that is delayed, but they have said that there are 87 projects in the pipeline right now up until 2025. So that's quite a number of projects there. Again, that's all the way to 2025. So we got 3-4 years there, a little bit of buffer. Still, that's 2025 fiscal year. So maybe into 2026. 87 projects is definitely a lot. Will I think, all those will come to fruition? Maybe not. We'll maybe see some cancellations there, maybe some more delays. I'm not sure every single one of those 87 will get out before the 2025 mark. That just is the projection. That being said, they did reduce their earnings forecast here as they do anticipate some delays with those projects. They do anticipate some lower expectations in its mobile business with that acquisition of Zynga, really taking a big chunk. That was a really big investment there. And, they're still waiting to recoup, I'm sure, a lot of that investment in the mobile space. That being said, we got a few quotables here. The CEO Strauss Zelnick says there have been some modest pipeline shifts, meaning some delays here. But the good news is those games are still coming. And he says, like I said in that the title there, he says, I'll choose delays any day over taking some flops. That's really the key in this business. The one thing I was mentioning beforehand was that, this wasn't Rockstar specifically. This was outsourced to a third-party studio. But last year, we did get that GTA trilogy remaster of the original Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas. That being said, there were a lot of problems there. People were not happy with a lot of bug issues, but a lot of texture issues, pop-ins there that even some people were saying the original games or even modded versions of the original games were able to do better. Unfortunately, there were a lot of issues there. So I think despite that not being a Rockstar developed game, even though it was outsourced, I think they learned from that for sure. They've obviously learned from all of the other delays and rocky launches throughout the last few years in the industry. I talked about some of that today on the show with some other games. So I think that obviously, they have their head in the right place here, thinking that, we can delay another game. We still have that Rockstar, credibility, you know what I mean? That Take-Two credibility of the quality of our products. So taking that with a grain of salt there, despite that last flop, if they can acknowledge that, make these public statements and promise, a level of quality, that'll definitely be better in the long run. Again, it's always better to delay a game and let it come out properly and get the sales it deserves rather than delay a game that's unfinished and then it's going to, sour the reputation of the game forever there when it launches in that kind of state. So again, that's about it for everything here on the Take-Two earnings call. They did get a little more in depth on the types of games here, and we can cover this really briefly. They said there are 24 immersive core games, meaning like the core. I guess we could speculate on what exactly that means, but immersive core means like the core bread and butter of what we're looking for a AAA game. 10 independent games, so maybe third-party studios. 28 mobile games, so still on mobile there. 7 mid-core games, which I'm curious if that means maybe in the $20-$30 range. Maybe that's kind of like a double A. Some people would use the term for games like that. Maybe that's what they mean by mid-core. And then we also have 8 new iterations of previously released titles. So think more remasters, more remakes, more ports to other systems. Maybe that's another next-gen version of some other games that we've only seen on the last gen. We'll have to wait and see there. Yeah, we see Take-Two is getting smacked on earnings calls. Thank you for that. That is true. As we've seen here, they are reducing their earnings calls for the entire next fiscal year. That stock is down. Yeah, so I'm not sure what's going to happen for them next, but I will predict if you are an investor here, again, I'm no investor, but I would say this is a good time to invest in Take-Two. Because if they are, the stock is getting kind of slammed right now. I have no doubt in my mind it will be going back up. This is the developer of 2K Sports, of NBA 2K, of Grand Theft Auto. Whenever Grand Theft Auto 6 comes back into the picture, I don't think there's any worry there that you're going to see the stock go back to a very suitable space. Again, I know everything I just said there with mobile earnings. I still stand by it. Of course, that's the fact of the matter here. The earnings, the reported earnings are lowered, and that investment was huge. There was a big mobile investment there. That being said, I think within the next year or two, you're going to get that GTA 6 boost, and there is nothing, I think, in the entertainment sphere. I don't care if you're Disney, if you're Netflix, I don't care what brand you are, if you're HBO, there's nothing that makes money like a new GTA game. So I have no doubt in my mind that may be a smart investment right now. If you see that Take-Two stock going down, maybe hop on it now in the dip and kind of ride that stock a little higher. And I'm not making any investment advice here, but I do think that if I had any knowledge whatsoever, I do think Take-Two will definitely bounce back from this. I would be shocked if they didn't. That being said, I am going to move on here as we are about halfway through here, and we got a lot more to cover on the docket here. So I'm going to bounce over to my docket on screen, and I'll get us to our next article here. And unfortunately, this is a bit of a sad story here. This is something that I was really sad to hear last week. And this was the story, if you hadn't heard already, that Kevin Conroy, who was the famous voice of Batman, has passed away. So I'm going to bring the story up. Again, not much else to say here other than I'm just really, this is really sad news to hear. And again, we could discuss the work here, of course, but there's not much else to say other than we just, our condolences go out to Kevin Conroy's family and everyone who is a fan of his work and of his character. Again, probably, someone who probably inspired more people than you could even count. Batman is not obviously an iconic hero for so many different reasons. And Kevin Conroy was the voice of Batman for, I believe, over 20, 30 years. We think all the way back to the Batman animated series. He played Batman pretty much throughout that and every other animated version of Batman you could think of. He was, of course, Batman in the Arkham series as well, the video game series, of course. And it's really sad to say that he passed away from cancer earlier last week. So, of course, throughout the internet, there have been a lot of condolences. Fans have been, posting and sharing messages. People who worked with Kevin Conroy and those who were fans of the show have both, have all put out tributes. And I've seen some very nice tributes. There were a few comic artists or Batman artists who made comics specifically with Batman, mourning the loss of his friend Kevin Conroy. I think it was really touching. And again, it's just there's not much else I could say here. Then it's just it's sad news to hear. And again, my heart goes out to everyone who had known him and was related to him, and everyone who was a fan. It's just really sad news to hear. Again, this was last week though. I feel like a lot of people may have heard of this already, but I would be remiss if I did not cover this on the show since we didn't have an episode last week. But that being said, Conroy's Batman really was, I think, the iconic version of Batman for a lot of people. Of course, everybody argues between the movie Batmans, who is the Batman. But for so many, especially a lot of kids who watch the animated series, and we're talking millions of people really who watch that, everything he's worked on. This really was, the Batman for so many people. He has that iconic voice. I'm just thinking of him saying Alfred or any little one-liner. When I think of what Batman's voice is, this is the voice I think of. And I think most people, even if you don't know Kevin Conroy before this, you may not even realize that is the voice you're thinking of. Like, he really did embody Batman. So yeah, and I agreed there, Jacob. Rest in peace. Again, there's not much else I want to say on that other than, I send out my best wishes to his family and to everyone. And we send our condolences, but very sad story there. But we just wanted to, give a short tribute here to Kevin Conroy, the Batman. So that being said, I am going to move on here but my heart goes out there, of course. We're gonna move on to our next story here. Again, we have quite a bit more stories to get through, guys. So we're to continue on moving here, and bear with me as I got this tiny. I'm moving that little infinity marker on the screen. You'll see in a second, and it's a bit tough to track here. So bear with me as I get that down the screen. But as you can see on the docket in a moment, we are going to move on to God of War Ragnarok, actually, as I get this moved down. So I will get that over. Here we go. All right. And I will bring up that next article. So again, a few more stories here, but we'll see. We're probably gonna get around. We're probably gonna end around the 2 o'clock mark here, guys. Maybe 2:15. We'll see. We're making good time here. So thanks for sticking with me. That being said, as I mentioned, we're gonna bring up God of War Ragnarok here. So as you can see on the headline I just brought up, God of War Ragnarok has made a bunch of references throughout the game, as you'd expect in a story game. A lot of Easter eggs, especially some other PlayStation Easter eggs. But this one specifically, I thought would be worth covering, and I can discuss the other ones as we go through it. But as you see here, God of War Ragnarok makes a PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale reference. So if you're not familiar with PlayStation All Stars, this was PlayStation's basically essentially their version of Smash Bros. And you see that a lot now with a lot of other character brawl, fighters, where we have Multiverse is a big one right now, where you have all those Warner Brothers characters in a Smash Bros. Type environment. I'm forgetting the name of the Nickelodeon All Star Brawl we had as well, with all the Nickelodeon characters fighting in a Smash Bros. Type game. PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale, again, was essentially PlayStation's version of this a few years back, if you guys don't remember. That being said, Kratos from God of War, of course, an iconic PlayStation character, was part of that. Then there were a lot of other characters. There were, there were characters from, I believe, Parappa the Rappa, classic PlayStation character there. There was characters from The Last of Us, a lot of, Uncharted, Jack and Daxter series. I'm naming all Insomniac games there, but a lot of, famous PlayStation series. That being said, I want to scroll down here because we get a quick kind of quote during God of War where they mention a few of these characters. So again, God of War takes place within the realms of different, realms of the gods. So now we are in Norse mythology. I don't want to spoil too much for God of War if you don't play God of War, but again, the original games were in Greek mythology, so you fought against gods like Zeus and Poseidon. Now, you're in Norse mythology, and you're seeing characters like Thor, Odin, Baldur, and I don't want to get too into any of the plot of God of War. No worries there. I won't spoil anything. That being said, it goes, it bears the question, if there are all these realms of existence within God of War, you can go to all these mythical lands. Who's to say that the other mythical lands of like PlayStation, like other, religions and other mythical creatures, like we see obviously the Norse and all the Greek gods, both were part of the same universe. They said, what if we include other, these other mythological universes within? So here we have a little dialogue here within the game where Mimir, who is this kind of floating head who talks throughout the game, says to Kratos, the main character, I've heard you also fought in a tournament. And he says, I fought in many. And he says, with this particular one, there were beasts, scoundrels, princesses, the undead, automatons, and maybe referring to Ratchet and Clank there, who knows. And history's greatest musician, which I think they're referring to Parappa the Rappa. If you don't know, that's a classic PlayStation character, the rapping game, one of my favorite PlayStation games. That being said, he says, that's not true, isn't it? And Kratos says, I wouldn't want to speak of this. So it's a reference directly here, as you see on screen, to him fighting in this tournament of these characters, which was everybody believes to be PlayStation All-Stars. That being said, there were not just this reference in this game, but there are also, and again, I won't want to spoil anything too, in depth here for the game, but there are a series of Easter eggs that are poems throughout the game, which hint at different video games throughout the PlayStation, Rolodex here. So I believe the first one I got was a poem about 9 warriors, right? It had something to do with 9 warriors, moving a ball around. I realized it was just an allegory for baseball, and it was actually an MLB The Show poem. There was another one that talked about, these metal creatures and a red-haired hero, which I realized was Horizon Zero Dawn. So they're referencing all of these big, PlayStation franchises within these poems for the game, which I think is really cool to kind of say that, hint that they're referencing different realms within the God of War universe as well. So I think it's a big thing these days with any IP to kind of tie in the multiverse of other, things, correlating within the same universe. It's always fun to do. I think it's always been a fun thing to do within fiction. So to see them do this in a really cool way here, I think is pretty interesting. Again, it's actually the one I was speaking of here. If I can zoom in on this picture, maybe not, but you can see there's a baseball logo on this poem here. Very tiny on stream here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but that was the MLB The Show poem in God of War, which I thought was really cool to see that. Actually, was just playing God of War myself and picked this up really recently, which is what prompted me to find this article and add it to the show. I thought it was a pretty cool series of Easter eggs, so I thought I'd include that. That being said, again, we're going to move on to some more PlayStation here. As you can see on the docket, I'm moving through pretty quickly here, but again, we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm trying to hit around that hour mark here, as I said earlier. So, as I said here, we have Gran Turismo next on the docket. We spoke about this again 2-3 times on the show throughout the announcement, throughout the casting of David Harbour. If you know David Harbour from Stranger Things, he's Hopper in Stranger Things. Again, he's also in the new Hellboy reboot. I believe he's also in that new Santa Claus movie coming out next month, where Santa's kind of an action hero. I'm forgetting the name of that movie. Forgive me, but I have seen some trailers for that. So if you do know David Harbour from Stranger Things, you will know, we'll know how I'm talking about. That being said, we did get some more behind the scenes here on that Gran Turismo movie that he is a part of. So we spoke earlier that this movie is going to be about David Harbour, who is a performer. He's playing. He's playing and acting in this movie. A former Gran Turismo racer, so a real life professional race car driver who finds a Gran Turismo video game player who is very, very skilled, and he ends up mentoring and training him to become a real life race car driver, a real champion. So that being said, we have our first behind the scenes, shot here. This is shot 4B, interestingly enough. And we're on a racetrack here. You can see in the background, that's a Nissan GTR, a few other cars here. I think there's another GTR here. It might be 4 of them. A bit blurry here, so a bit tough for me to tell exactly what's going on behind here. But as we can see in the description, it's based on the inspiring true story of a real Gran Turismo player named Jan Martinborough, who won a series of gaming competitions, leading him to become a real life, actual professional race car driver. So I think it's a pretty cool story. Again, I'm not too familiar with Jan's story there. I'm gonna have to do a little more research on that. With that being said, the idea that you could win a bunch of Gran Turismo tournaments, be that good at, the virtual physics of learning how to use that driving simulator, so much so that you could then drive a real car with those same disciplines and same mechanics. It's a really cool story. I think it's a perfect like screenplay story. So it totally makes sense why they would go with this kind of this kind of avenue to make a Gran Turismo movie. Because when I first heard Gran Turismo movie, I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to go. I thought more along the lines of Fast and the Furious or the Need for Speed movie that came out a few years back with Aaron Paul. That was very much kind of a Fast and Furious kind of play on things, where it was kind of a street racing idea. I wasn't sure how the Gran Turismo movie was going to handle that kind of storyline, though. I think this makes total sense. I like they're incorporating the actual video game playing into the movie itself, but it's not just like a realistic version of the fictional game, but rather, it's incorporating the actual Gran Turismo series into the the real life story. So I really like that. I like that it's pulling off of that real life story, and it's a really cool, again, like I said, it's a perfect screenplay story to pull from real life and say based on a true story. It's like the whole formula is right there on paper. So I think on paper it sounds great, and I'm sure that in practice it seems like it'll be a fun, kind of action racing movie that I'll probably want to check out. Again, we're not sure exactly when this is releasing. There's no release date yet. That being said, we are shooting now. It's fall 2022. I'd say realistically maybe fall next year. I think that's very early. I think it's optimistic. I think 2024 is a really realistic time frame for this movie. Maybe summer 2024 flick, I think, seems pretty realistic. That being said, who knows? Maybe late next year. I'd be shocked, but with the post-production, I think it's probably going to go into this. I'm thinking 2024 is a good bet for the Gran Turismo movie. That being said, this was not much else to say on here. I thought there would be some. I scrolled down here thinking I'd have an extra sentence to say, but not really much else to say there. We actually do get a release date, so I apologize for that assumption. They have a release date here of a tentative August 11th of 2023. So we'll see if it hits that mark. I'm thinking, again, like I said, fall 2023 sounds pretty optimistic. I'm thinking maybe we see that delayed to spring 2024, but I think if they're starting shooting now, that seems like a late 2023, early 24 seems like the prime timeline there. So that's what I'm going to stick to there. And of course, we see on this article, they mentioned everything else going on with PlayStation's television and film division, where we had Last of Us showing up. We have, of course, the Fallout series, the Uncharted movie. They're just kind of going through all video game shows here, looking at this article. That being said, a lot to be excited about when it comes to live action video game adaptations. And I think in a way that we really haven't, had the privilege of being as optimistic for in the past with video game adaptations. I think there's a lot of really seems like serious investments and, respect of the subject matter here going forward. And that seems, that's exactly what I'd want to see from an adaptation of any video game property. So that seems really good. I'm definitely passionate about them doing these games justice when it comes to putting them in different forms here. Of course, there were some complaints, especially from Henry Cavill himself over at the Witcher series at Netflix. Unfortunately, we'll see how that plays out with the new recasting there. But again, I digress from all of that. Move on because we have some more movie video game news. So I do want to move on to those in the last few minutes here. That being said, we get some more, I believe, on the Gears movie next. Yeah, that's our next on the docket here. And this comes actually directly from Dave Bautista. So if you hadn't seen earlier last week, Netflix did announce that previously, while they did talk about this in the past as a potential project, it is now officially happening. And this is the Gears of War movie. That being said, Dave Bautista has been in the talks to play Marcus Phoenix in a Gears of War TV show movie pretty much since the original trilogy of those games came out. I can really think of maybe, I think 10 years, 15 years ago, even this was a conversation that would come up all the time where people would say, who would you want to cast for Marcus Phoenix? And they would bring up Bautista. That being said, a few years back, Bautista did dress up in the Gears of War gear here as a cog for a trailer. I believe it was Gears of War 3 or Judgment. I'm not sure when he suited up for one of the Gears of War trailers, and he was actually a playable character in the multiplayer, kind of based off of all those references to him looking like Marcus Phoenix. That being said, with the announcement of the live action movie happening, Batista wants back in, and this is not just an announcement from Netflix. I thought this was actually an official announcement at first when I first saw this, but this was just Batista himself posting on his Instagram saying, "It's on, hey, I can't." He put quote here, "I can't make this any easier." Tagging Netflix and Gears of War in his tweet here. And here he reposted a video from that old trailer of the old Gears of War games where and I guess it's buffering here. I hope they can show this whole trailer, but all it shows him suiting up in that Marcus Phoenix armor there and saying, again, I can't make it any easier. He wants to be a part of it. He wants to be Marcus Phoenix. And I think that'd be a really, really smart move for Netflix. I'm hopefully they're listening to this. I'm surprised they didn't already have him and some other people in mind when they announced this. That being said, of course, an announcement comes with, a lot of other pre-production work that has to go alongside that. That being said, you see here Bautista suiting up in the cog armor here. He wants to be part of it. He's ready to go. And I think Netflix should definitely listen to him. It seems like he said, it seems like a no-brainer here. I think he'd be a great candidate for the role. And that being said, Netflix has a lot going on. There's a lot more investment, not just in new adaptations and new programming, but in the video game space. They're investing in streaming. They're investing in some mobile games on the Netflix app that you could download under that Netflix gaming subscription. So Netflix is not averse to gaming whatsoever. Obviously, as I said earlier with The Witcher, and of course the Resident Evil show, there's Arcane on the League of Legends sides of things. So there's not all, there's a bit of a hit and miss. It's not a perfect resume, I would say, in terms of video game adaptations. It's also, it definitely could be worse. That's for sure. So Netflix is definitely investing heavily in the video game space, both in the IP space in terms of new productions, as well as just in gaming itself and jumping into like the streaming sphere. So again, I'm hopeful there. Hopefully that, they make the right decision here. I think they should do what I think fans are asking for, what Bautista themselves is asking for. I think they should cast him in this role. But again, that's not an official casting yet, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Although I do think that does make sense. But speaking on other casting choices that could or could have not happened, this one is a potential movie that could have happened back in the day that was scrapped that I just thought was very interesting and I thought would definitely be worth reporting on here. So as you may have seen in the docket, there was a potential Grand Theft Auto movie that almost happened back in the day. This was not very recent. This was all the way back, I believe, around the launch of Grand Theft Auto 3. As we see on screen here, games industry veteran Kirk Ewing said in a new episode of a podcast that he and Rockstar Sam Houser, quote, stayed up late one night talking about possibly making a GTA movie. So again, kind of just a hypothetical here. It wasn't like there were a lot of pieces in motion. That being said, he says it was just after Grand Theft Auto 3, and I think at that point, it was still in Sam's mind that it might be something he wanted to do. So at the time, the GTA movie was actually realistically being thrown around as a potential idea. That being said, there was a producer from LA, someone in Hollywood apparently had called Ewing with an offer to make the GTA movie, and they had said how they wanted Eminem to star and for Scott to direct. So I think it's very interesting that they said that Eminem would star. I'm assuming, and this is a personal assumption here, I'm assuming this was around the time of 8 Mile. After that movie having come out, have Eminem shown
that kind of role, this underdog. If you haven't seen 8 Mile, this is kind of almost semi-autobiographical of Eminem's story of him being the underdog in the hip hop scene and him rising above some personal life circumstances to make it or break it in that scene. So I guess they thought that kind of character could do well in a Grand Theft Auto movie, I guess, at the time, because I'm not sure why else they would have. I think obviously this was early 2000s. Eminem probably was, this was a much more high profile casting even than it is now. And not that Eminem isn't high profile now, but I think Eminem, especially given, off the height of 8 Mile, this was probably off of his earlier albums. He was probably a really high profile name for that kind of persona, I guess. So again, that's just my assumptions here. That's totally all going off of, me just saying that out, top of my head. That being said, it makes sense to me given it was around the time of Grand Theft Auto 3. But he says here, again, Sam Hauser of Rockstar was not interested after this offer from the Hollywood agent. He says, quote, Ewing says, at that point, they withdrew from any conversation about making a film when they realized that the media franchise that they had was bigger than any movie that was going on at the time. And man, if you were a movie maker at the time, you may have thought that sounded hyperbolic, or what kind of game would be bigger than any movie, but man, were they right. Because as I said earlier, Grand Theft Auto has continued to evolve into the biggest media product of all time, period. There is nothing that makes more money than Grand Theft Auto, no movie, and which is a really big thing to say. Think about, Avengers, I think of any big movie you could think of. There is not a single franchise that has made more money than Grand Theft Auto. So I always say that over and over, and I know I don't want to beat a dead horse there with that, but really let that sink in. I mean, when anyone can discredit gaming, if you're a film fan or a book fan, it's really hard to discredit anything that is the leading media product, of all time. So again, obviously I'm very passionate about gaming, and its space in the media industry. And I think that it's something that you really can't ignore because, gaming is not only here to stay. I think it is the premier form of entertainment. I think it is almost the final frontier of entertainment, if you will. It's something I always like to talk about here. But as I say that, we are kind of closing down here to our last story or so, and we're at about the hour mark here. So I'm going to move on to our final story. That being said, there's really not much else to say there on the Grand Theft Auto film. I thought it was a pretty cool idea. Again, that's not being produced. This was about 20 years or so ago, so probably not still on the docket for them over at Rockstar, but who knows? Especially after GTA 6, I think a Grand Theft Auto movie could happen some point in the future. I would never rule anything like that out per se, but this project, of course, definitely isn't happening anytime soon. This aforementioned Eminem project. Again, that being said, I do want to move on to our last story here. This is a bit of a feel-good story. This is another thing that is about 25 years or so in the making, give or take. I want to say 1997. Yeah, so about 25 years exactly from, I'm speaking on here, I'll get, of course, Pokemon, as you saw on the docket there. So I'm saying 1997 because I believe that was when the first episode of the cartoon animated series premiered. Again, I have not seen all the episodes of the animated series, but I was a Pokemon fan back in the day. I had the original Pokemon games. Me and my brother did on the Game Boy, Pokemon Blue, Red, Scarlet and Blue and Gold. We were big Pokemon fans back in the day, especially at the height, the early height of Pokemon for sure. That being said, this is a pretty, cool headline here that Ash Ketchum, the main character, finally has become the world's greatest Pokemon trainer. So that's something, if you're a fan of Pokemon, you've been saying or singing along to the song for 25 years now, that, you got to catch them all, got to become the greatest. That's always been the goal of the main character. That being said, we have a new episode here of Pokemon Ultimate Journeys, which is the currently running animated series. And in this, Ash has finally gone to a new Pokemon championship. This is the Pokemon World Coronation Series Masters 8 tournament. Forgive me if I'm butchering that there. That being said, in this newest episode, he finally wins. This is the first time that Ash has actually defeated all of the enemies, actually. I did not know this was actually the first time this happened, personally. But Ash has finally won the entire tournament, making technically the perpetual, as they say, a perpetual 10-year-old finally the world's greatest Pokemon trainer, as the song and as the franchise has always, purported that he would be for so long. So this is kind of a cool news for anyone who's a Pokemon fan, that Ash is finally, he's finally maybe not caught them all, but he finally is the greatest that ever was, as the theme song always stated. So again, not much else to say though, and I thought it was a kind of a cool headline to end the show on here, kind of a feel good notice here. But of course, as they say in the article here, it's a big deal for Ash, the character. Of course, he's for 25 years has been going through these tournaments, has been falling slightly short of victory. It comes in some sort of, top 16, top 10, whatever it may be. Again, I was actually unaware that he had never actually won. I thought that was part of Pokemon, that at some point in the series he might have won these tournaments, but no, we're finally seeing this is finally. I'm not sure if this is any sort of finale or anything for some people. I'm sure they're going to continue to make more and more episodes of the Pokemon shows. That being said, it's kind of a full circle moment for anyone who has grown up with Pokemon, who has been a Pokemon fan throughout their childhood or throughout their years, to see that Ash has finally done it. He's finally won it all. So they have here in their article, congratulations to the character. Again, maybe it sounds kind of goofy to congratulate a fictional character, but I think if anyone anyone is a fan of Pokemon would know that that's a pretty it's pretty cool to see that finally happen. It's like saying that SpongeBob finally got like a trucker's license. It was a big deal for him to get his driver's license. Like one of those things in fiction. One of those things the character just never achieved. It was always the big thing. So it's kind of funny to see that finally has happened for Ash Ketchum and Pokemon. That being said, I want to thank everyone who joined me today, as that kind of brings me to the end of our docket here. Again, quite a lot of stories. I covered about 2 weeks worth of news there in under an hour. So apologies if I was going a little quickly there, but I wanted to keep that within the hour mark. I think we did a pretty good job at doing so. So I want to thank everyone who joined me today. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, Jacob, especially in the comments, and Rob as well, for always commenting there and keeping me up to date. I appreciate you letting me know about that mic issue too, because that could have been a bigger issue if I would have let that run for more than those 2 minutes there. So appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you guys joining in live. That being said, if you are watching on a recording later on, thank you for tuning in. That being said, I will be adding timestamps to this. So if you're watching live alongside with me, you didn't have those. But over the weekend, what happens is YouTube will process the video. I'll go back in and I'll add timestamps by the stories. So if you want to watch later on, you can always go story by story and figure out what's most interesting to you. And then you could follow that along. Thank you so much, Jacob. I really appreciate you tuning in. Have a great weekend to everyone who joined. Thank you so much. And we will talk on the next episode of the Endless Report. That being said, I do want to mention one last thing. It is Thanksgiving next week here in the USA, so I will not be here live for next episode. But that being said, we will maybe early next week. I'll let you guys know on the Discord here in Endless Studios. Maybe we'll go on a Monday after Thanksgiving there, or maybe we'll just do that next Friday. But don't worry, I'm gonna still be doing my docket. I'll make sure I won't miss any of the news. So we'll have on the next episode everything that happened between this episode and next. I'll make sure it's all covered. So no worries there. But we may not be here next Friday. I just want to let you guys know that. That being said, I want to appreciate I really appreciate you all joining once again. I want to thank you one last time and have a great weekend. And I will see you all on the next episode of the Endless Report. So that's about it for me. I'm gonna throw up my thanks for watching screen, and we'll let the stream run out. But if you have any final comments or anything, let me know, or shoot me a message in the Endless Studios Discord, and I'll be sure to chat with you all and answer. But we'll have a lot more coming up this fall, so make sure to stay tuned to the channel. And take care. All right, guys, that's about it. Thank you, and have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.